The folded scrap of paper trembled in Elena's palm like a dying butterfly. 3 words inked in desperate handwriting. It's not safe here. She'd written them 47 minutes ago in the supply closet, her hands shaking so violently she'd nearly dropped the pen twice. Now, standing in the gleaming executive hallway of Pierce Industries' 63rd floor, she had exactly one chance to deliver it to the man who might already be marked for death. Hey there, beautiful souls. I'm so glad you're here with me today for a story that'll make your heart race and remind you why trust and courage matter more than we realize. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing where this community reaches. And hey, how are you doing today? Really, I want to know. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button because stories like this one, they're what we do here, and you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Trust me on this one. Now, back to Elena, because what she's about to do in the next 60 seconds will either save a life or destroy her own. The CEO's office door stood 10 feet away. Alexander Trask, intimidating, brilliant, untouchable, was inside, and Elena had scrubbed his floors for 3 years without him ever knowing her name. She was invisible. The ghost who emptied trash cans and polished marble, while the powerful people who actually mattered made decisions that moved millions of dollars with a single signature. But this morning, that invisibility had saved her life. Because they hadn't seen her. Not really. Not when she'd been replacing the water pitcher in the corner of the executive boardroom at 6:47 a.m., her reflection barely visible in the glass wall overlooking the city's skyline. She'd frozen when she heard them. 2 voices she recognized instantly. Jonathan Reeves, the chief operating officer with his polished accent and designer suits. And Gregory Sterling, the chief financial officer whose smile never quite reached his calculating eyes. Tuesday morning, Gregory had said, his voice low and cold as winter steel. The quarterly review meeting. He always takes the private elevator alone at 8:15. The cable inspection was yesterday, Jonathan replied. Our contact confirmed the backup safety already has the defect installed. When it drops, it'll look like catastrophic mechanical failure. Routine investigation. No questions. Elena's blood had turned to ice. And if that fails? Gregory pressed. It won't. But we have contingencies. The car accident on his way home. The gas leak in his penthouse that our building inspector will miss during next week's check. Alexander Trask will be dead within 72 hours, and the board will vote us into control before his body's cold. We've already secured the votes. The water pitcher had nearly slipped from Elena's numb fingers. She'd set it down with agonizing care, her pulse thundering so loud she was certain they'd hear it. But they'd been too focused on their murderous plans, too confident in their power, too assured that no one who mattered was listening. They hadn't counted on the maid. Elena had backed out of the room, her cleaning cart wheels silent on the plush carpet, her breathing shallow and controlled despite the scream building in her throat. She'd made it to the supply closet, locked the door, and written the note with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It's not safe here. 3 words that could mean everything or nothing. 3 words that could save a man's life or mark her as crazy, paranoid, a liability to be quietly dismissed. But she'd overheard something else too, something that made this note absolutely critical. They'd seen her. Just for a second, Gregory had glanced toward the corner where she'd been standing. His eyes had narrowed. He'd said something to Jonathan she couldn't quite hear. And then they'd both looked at the corner again. They knew someone might have been there. They knew someone might have heard. Which meant Elena was already in danger. Which meant doing nothing wasn't safe either. So here she stood, her worn shoes squeaking softly on the marble floor, the note clutched in her sweating palm. Alexander Trask's executive assistant had just left for her coffee break. Elena had timed it perfectly. 30 seconds. That's all she had before someone appeared and questioned why a housekeeping staff member was lingering outside the CEO's private office. She knocked. 3 soft raps that sounded like thunder in her ears. Come in. His voice carried through the heavy door. Authoritative, distracted, the voice of a man with 1,000 problems more important than whoever was interrupting him now. Elena pushed the door open. Her breath caught. Alexander Trask sat behind a desk of black glass and chrome, his attention fixed on 3 computer monitors displaying streams of data she couldn't begin to understand. He was younger than she'd expected up close, maybe 40, with sharp features and dark hair showing the first hints of silver at the temples. He looked tired. The kind of tired that came from carrying the weight of 12,000 employees and their families on your shoulders every single day. He looked up. His gray eyes registered surprise. Probably because housekeeping didn't usually interrupt him. Probably because she was staring at him with the wild expression of someone who'd just witnessed a murder plot. Her voice cracked. She crossed the distance to his desk in 4 quick steps, her heart hammering. She couldn't speak. If she spoke, someone might hear through the door. If she spoke, she might say the wrong thing, might sound insane, might get dismissed before she could make him understand. So she pressed the note into his hand. Their fingers touched for half a second. His skin was warm. Human. This wasn't some distant figure from the business magazines. This was a person whose life hung in the balance of whether he believed 3 words scribbled by a terrified maid. "It's not safe here," she whispered, so quiet it was barely sound at all. "Please read it. Please believe me. They saw me. I heard." She choked on the words. "Please." And then, because staying any longer was suicide, because she could already hear footsteps in the hallway, because her courage was a finite resource rapidly depleting, Elena turned and fled. She didn't see Alexander Trask's expression as he unfolded the note. She didn't see his eyes widen, his entire body go still, the way his hand moved almost unconsciously to his phone before stopping. But she would soon discover that the most powerful man in the building had just realized something that changed everything. The invisible maid might be the only person in Pierce Industries he could trust, and his reaction to that truth was about to shock everyone. Alexander Trask read the note 3 times before his brain fully processed what his eyes were seeing. "It's not safe here." The handwriting was shaky, urgent, the letters pressed so hard into the paper they'd nearly torn through. He looked up at the door the maid had disappeared through, his pulse beginning to accelerate in a way it hadn't since his days as a Marine, when that particular quickening of the heart meant danger was close and real. He didn't know her name. That realization hit him like a physical blow. 3 years she'd worked in this building. He'd seen the employee retention reports, knew every department's turnover rate down to the decimal point, and he'd never once bothered to learn the name of the woman who'd just risked everything to warn him. The fear in her eyes had been genuine. The tremor in her voice, when she'd whispered "they saw me," had been raw terror. Alexander stood abruptly, the note clutched in his fist. His office suddenly felt like a cage. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, windows he'd always loved for their sweeping views of the empire he'd built from nothing, now felt like a fishbowl. Exposed. Vulnerable. "It's not safe here." Who wasn't safe? Him? Her? Everyone. He moved to his desk and pulled up the building's security feed on his private monitor. His fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, a skill from his early days when he couldn't afford a security team and had installed every camera himself. There. Hallway 63C. The maid was hurrying toward the service elevator, her cleaning cart abandoned near his assistant's desk. She was practically running, her body language screaming panic. Something was very, very wrong. Alexander had built Pierce Industries from a failing manufacturing company into a tech empire worth $42 billion. He'd done it through instinct, through reading people, through trusting his gut when the numbers said one thing and his intuition screamed another. And right now, every instinct he'd honed over 15 years of cutthroat business was telling him the same thing. Believe her. He grabbed his phone and pulled up his contact list, then stopped. Who could he trust? The question paralyzed him for a heartbeat. Jonathan Reeves, his COO, the man who'd stood beside him through the Castor merger, who'd saved the company during the 2019 crisis. Gregory Sterling, his CFO, the financial genius who'd tripled their profit margins in 2 years. They saw me. The maid's words echoed in his skull. Who saw her? Where? Doing what? Alexander's mind raced through the morning schedule. Executive boardroom. The quarterly review prep session he hadn't attended because he'd been on a call with Tokyo investors. Jonathan and Gregory had both been there. Who else? His phone buzzed. A text from Jonathan. * morning briefing in 10. Conference room A. Critical updates on the Sterling acquisition. * Sterling acquisition. Gregory's pet project. The deal that would net them both massive bonuses if it closed. Alexander's jaw tightened. He texted back, running late. Start without me. He needed information. He needed to understand what he was walking into before he made a move. Because if this was real, if someone in his inner circle was actually plotting against him, then the wrong reaction could trigger whatever they were planning. He pulled up the employee database and searched the housekeeping staff. 47 people. He narrowed it down by floor assignment, by shift schedule, by who had access to the executive level this early. There. Elena Ripley, 28 years old. Hired 3 years ago. Spotless record. No disciplinary actions. No complaints. Just a quiet, invisible presence who showed up at 5 a.m. every weekday and kept the executive floor immaculate. Elena. He studied her employee photo. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Brown eyes that looked tired even in the official picture. A slight woman who probably weighed 110 pounds soaking wet. She looked like someone the world had taught to make herself small, to not take up space, to survive by being overlooked. And she just walked into his office and warned him his life might be in danger. Alexander's phone buzzed again. Gregory this time. Alex, we need you. Jonathan's pushing hard for the Sterling deal close date. Your call. The timing felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. He thought about his morning routine. The private elevator at 8:15. His assistant had that scheduled like clockwork because he hated being interrupted during his first analysis hour. The drive home through the usual route his security team had cleared. The penthouse apartment in the building he'd personally invested in, where he knew every contractor, every inspector, every maintenance worker. Or thought he knew them. It's not safe here. Alexander made a decision. He opened his encrypted messaging app, the one he used for communications he never wanted discovered, even by his own IT department, and sent a message to Marcus Chun, his head of private security. Marcus was former Secret Service, paranoid to a fault, and one of the few people Alexander trusted completely because he'd saved Alexander's life in Beijing 3 years ago when a corporate espionage situation had turned violent. Need you in my office. Now. Come alone. Tell no one. 3 minutes later, Marcus appeared in the doorway. 6'2", built like a linebacker, with sharp eyes that constantly scanned for threats. He closed the door behind him and locked it without being asked. What's wrong? Marcus's hand instinctively moved toward his concealed weapon. You look like you've seen a ghost. Alexander handed him the note. A housekeeping staff member just gave me this. Elena Ripley. She was terrified, Marcus. Said they saw me and ran. Marcus read the note, his expression darkening. Any idea what this is about? No, but I need you to find her. Quietly. Bring her somewhere safe where we can talk without anyone knowing. And Marcus? Alexander's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Don't tell anyone. Not Jonathan. Not Gregory. Not even your own team. Just you. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You think it's internal. I think a woman who's been invisible for 3 years just made herself very, very visible to warn me about something. And I think if she's right, then someone in this building wants me dead. The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Marcus pulled out his phone. I'll find her. 20 minutes. Make it 10, Alexander said. Because if someone saw her near that boardroom, if they know she heard something she shouldn't have. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Elena Ripley might have just saved his life. Now he needed to save hers. Elena made it to the basement level before her legs gave out. She collapsed against the concrete wall near the service entrance, her chest heaving, her vision swimming with spots of black and white. The note was gone. She'd delivered it. Whatever happened next was out of her hands. Except it wasn't. Because they'd seen her. Gregory Sterling's eyes in that boardroom. Calculating, cold, the way a predator looks at prey. She replayed the moment in her mind. Had he recognized her? Had he registered her face? Or just the presence of someone who shouldn't have been there? The executive floor housekeeping staff wore generic uniforms, kept their heads down, existed in the periphery of vision like furniture. But if he'd looked at the staff roster, if he'd checked the security footage, if he'd asked even one question about who'd been cleaning that morning. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling hands. A text from her supervisor. Where are you? Card abandoned on 63. Report to HR immediately. Her blood turned to ice. HR immediately. That wasn't normal. That was never normal unless something was very, very wrong. She stared at the message, her mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was routine. Maybe her supervisor was just annoyed about the card. Maybe. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell above her. Multiple sets. Moving fast. Coming down. Elena ran. She burst through the service exit into the alley behind Pierce Industries, the morning air hitting her like a slap. Her car was 6 blocks away in the employee lot. 6 blocks she'd have to cover without looking like she was fleeing, without drawing attention, without. Elena Ripley? She spun around. A man stood 3 feet away, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. Tall, muscular, wearing a dark suit with an earpiece visible. Security. But not building security, something else. Something private. My name is Marcus Chun. I work for Alexander Trask. He sent me to find you. The man's voice was calm, authoritative, the tone of someone trained to de-escalate panic. You're not in trouble, but you are in danger. I need you to come with me. Now. Elena's back hit the brick wall. How do I know you're telling the truth? You don't. Marcus pulled out his phone and turned it toward her. On the screen was a video call. Alexander Trask's face filled the display, those gray eyes focused entirely on her. Elena, the CEO said, and hearing her name from his lips sent a shock through her system. I read your note. I believe you. But I need you to trust me now. Marcus is going to bring you somewhere safe where we can talk. Please. If what you overheard is real, then we're both in danger. And I need to know everything. The fear in Elena's chest transformed into something else. Relief. Validation. The overwhelming realization that she'd been heard, believed, that she wasn't alone in this nightmare. She nodded. Marcus ended the call and gestured toward a black SUV parked at the alley's entrance. 3-minute walk. Stay close to me. Don't look at anyone. They moved quickly. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Every person they passed felt like a threat. Every car that drove by might contain Gregory or Jonathan or someone else in on the conspiracy. She kept her head down, focused on Marcus's broad shoulders ahead of her, and prayed she'd made the right choice. The SUV's windows were tinted almost black. Marcus opened the rear door and Elena climbed in, the leather seats cool against her trembling legs. Marcus slid into the driver's seat and the engine purred to life. Where are we going? Elena asked. Secure location. Mr. Trask is meeting us there. Marcus pulled into traffic with practiced ease. You did the right thing, Ms. Ripley. Whatever you heard, whatever you saw, thank you for speaking up. Elena closed her eyes. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She'd been awake since 4:30 a.m. She'd witnessed a murder plot. She'd confronted a billionaire CEO. And now she was in a car with a security specialist heading to an unknown location to discuss how to stop 2 powerful men from committing murder. This wasn't her life. Elena Ripley cleaned floors. She lived in a studio apartment in Queens. She sent money home to her mother in Ohio and saved every extra dollar for the nursing degree she'd been chipping away at for 3 years. She was nobody. Invisible. Except now she wasn't. She imagined herself saying if this were a movie, if her life were something people watched for entertainment instead of lived in terror. The thought was so absurd, she almost laughed. Almost. If you're loving this story so far, drop a comment and let me know what you think is going to happen next. Also, do not forget to hit the subscribe button. 20 minutes later, Marcus pulled into an underground parking garage. They took an elevator to the 15th floor of a building Elena didn't recognize. The hallway was empty, sterile, the kind of corporate neutral that could exist anywhere in Manhattan. Marcus opened a door to a conference room. Alexander Trask stood by the window, his back to them, phone pressed to his ear. He turned when they entered, ended his call, and for a long moment just looked at Elena. Thank you for trusting me, he said finally. Please sit. Elena sat. Her legs were grateful. Marcus took a position by the door, alert, watching. Alexander pulled out a chair across from her. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the controlled intensity of someone used to making life-or-death decisions. But there was something else too, concern. Real, genuine concern. Tell me everything, he said. Every word you remember. Every detail, no matter how small. Start from the beginning. So Elena did. She told him about the water pitcher, the voices, the exact words Jonathan and Gregory had used. The elevator sabotage planned for Tuesday morning. The backup contingencies, the car accident, the gas leak. The timeline of 72 hours. The board votes already secured. With every word, Alexander's expression grew darker. When she finished, Silence filled the room like a living thing. They saw you, Alexander said quietly. It wasn't a question. Gregory looked right at the corner where I was standing. I don't know if he saw my face or just knew someone was there. But Jonathan said something to him, and they both looked again. And then this morning, my supervisor texted me to report to HR immediately, which never happens, and there were people in the stairwell coming after me. Marcus. Alexander's voice cut through her panic like a blade. Sweep her phone. Check for tracking software. Then get me the security footage from the executive boardroom between 6:30 and 7 a.m. And pull the elevator maintenance records for the past week. Marcus moved immediately, efficient and silent. Alexander leaned forward, his eyes locked on Elena's. You just saved my life. Now I'm going to save yours. But I need you to stay here, stay safe, and let me handle what comes next. Can you do that? Elena nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Good. Alexander stood. Because what comes next is going to shock everyone in that building. And I promise you, Elena, when this is over, Jonathan Reeves and Gregory Sterling are going to wish they'd never underestimated the maid. The security footage confirmed Elena's worst fears. Alexander watched the timestamp tick forward on the monitor, 6:47 a.m. There she was, a small figure in a housekeeping uniform, barely visible in the corner of the executive boardroom, setting down the water pitcher with careful, practiced movements. And there were Jonathan and Gregory, heads bent together, voices too low for the camera's audio to capture clearly. But the body language told the story. The furtive glances. The way Gregory's hand sliced through the air like a blade when he spoke. The cold smile on Jonathan's face when he checked his watch. And then, at 6:52 a.m., Gregory's head turned. Looked directly at the corner where Elena stood frozen. Alexander's jaw clenched. He watched Elena's reflection in the glass wall. The moment she realized she'd been spotted, the terror that flooded her posture, the agonizing care with which she backed out of the room. Audio enhancement, he asked Marcus, who stood beside him in the secure conference room. Already sent to our team. We'll have it cleaned up in an hour. Marcus pointed at the screen. But look at this. The footage jumped forward. 7:03 a.m. Gregory and Jonathan exited the boardroom. Gregory pulled out his phone, made a call. 30 seconds of conversation. Then he nodded to Jonathan. They split up, Jonathan heading toward the elevators, Gregory moving in the direction of HR. He called someone, Alexander said, his voice cold. The moment he suspected Elena overheard, he made a call. Gets worse. Marcus pulled up another feed. HR floor, 7:15 a.m. The screen showed Gregory entering the Human Resources Department. He spoke with someone at the desk, then disappeared into an office. 6 minutes later, he emerged. On his way out, he stopped, pulled out his phone again, and typed something. Marcus swiped to another screen. A text message log his team had intercepted. We cracked Gregory's phone 10 minutes ago. This is what he sent at 7:21 a.m. Alexander read the message, and ice flooded his veins. Cleaning staff might be a problem. Elena Ripley, 28, floor 63 assignment. Have someone collect her quietly. Don't let her leave the building. The reply came from an unknown number. Understood. En route. That was 40 minutes before she came to your office, Marcus said quietly. She delivered that note knowing they were already coming for her. The weight of that realization hit Alexander like a physical blow. Elena Ripley, a woman he'd never bothered to know, who made poverty wages cleaning up after people like him, had risked her life to save his. While assassins were being dispatched to silence her, she'd walked into his office with trembling hands and pressed a note into his palm. She was either the bravest person he'd ever met, or the most foolish. No, not foolish. Desperate. Because doing nothing meant watching him die. And Elena Ripley, invisible maid, apparently couldn't live with that on her conscience. Where is she now? Alexander asked. Safe room 2 floors down. I posted 2 of my best outside her door. Marcus pulled up another screen. But we've got a bigger problem. Jonathan just called an emergency board meeting for 2 p.m. today. Agenda item. Critical leadership continuity discussion. Alexander's blood ran cold. They're accelerating. They know Elena talked to you. They know their window is closing. Marcus's expression was grim. If they can't kill you quietly, they'll do it publicly. Coup d'etat. Get the board to vote you out. Claim mental instability or financial impropriety or whatever story they've prepared. With you discredited and removed, they take control. Over my dead body. That's still on the table too. Marcus gestured at the screen. Elevator maintenance records show the safety inspection was done by an independent contractor, one that doesn't exist. The company registration is fake. Someone paid a lot of money to get access to that elevator shaft. Alexander moved to the window, his mind racing through scenarios and countermoves like a chess grandmaster planning 20 steps ahead. Jonathan and Gregory had been thorough. They'd planted evidence, secured board votes, arranged multiple assassination attempts as backups. This wasn't improvised. This was months, maybe years, of careful planning, which meant they had resources, allies, people Alexander trusted who'd already chosen sides. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Mr. Reeves asking for your location. Says it's urgent. Of course it was urgent. They needed to know where he was. Needed to control the board meeting narrative. Needed him isolated and vulnerable. Alexander typed back, in meetings offsite. We'll return for board session at 2. Let them think he was oblivious. Let them believe their plan was still intact. He turned to Marcus. I need a full security detail on Elena. If anything happens to her, if they get anywhere near her. They won't, Marcus said firmly. But boss, we need to talk about you. If Gregory and Jonathan are willing to kill over this, they're not going to stop just because you're aware. That elevator is a death trap. Your penthouse might be compromised. Your car, your regular route home, anywhere you're predictable. I know. Alexander's voice was steel. Which is why I'm not going to be predictable. Get me everything. Financial records for both of them, communication logs, travel history, anyone they've met with in the past 6 months. I want to know every skeleton in their closets, every angle they're playing. Already on it. Marcus pulled out his tablet. But there's something else. Elena mentioned they said the board votes were already secured. That means that some of your board members are in on this. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. His board. People he'd appointed. People he'd trusted with the future of his company. The thought of betrayal from that many angles made his stomach turn. Who do we trust? He asked. Besides me. Your Aunt Catherine on the board. She's clean. I'd stake my life on it. Maybe Thomas Whitmore, the tech advisor. Everyone else is suspect until proven otherwise. Alexander pulled out his phone and dialed. It rang twice. Alexander. His Aunt Catherine's warm voice filled his ear. Darling, I was just thinking about you. Are you? Aunt Kath, I need you to listen very carefully. Don't react. Don't say anything that would alert anyone near you. Just yes or no answers. Are you alone? A pause. Yes. Can you get to a secure location in the next hour without anyone knowing? Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted, still warm, but laced with steel. Catherine Pierce hadn't built her own tech empire by being naive. Yes. Do it. I'll send you an address. Come alone. Tell no one. Catherine, his voice dropped. Someone's trying to kill me, and I think half the board is helping them. He heard her sharp intake of breath. I'm leaving now. Alexander ended the call and looked at Marcus. We have 4 hours before that board meeting. For hours to build a case, expose the traitors, and make sure Elena doesn't end up dead because she tried to do the right thing. And if we can't pull it together in time? Alexander's smile was cold and dangerous. Then I walk into that boardroom and burn it all down. If Jonathan and Gregory want a war, they're about to learn why I didn't build a $42 billion empire by playing nice. What do you think Alexander's next move should be? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing your theories. Marcus nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I've been in firefights across 3 continents. And I've never seen you like this. They threatened someone under my protection. Alexander's voice was quiet, lethal. Elena Ripley became my responsibility the moment she pressed that note into my hand. And I protect what's mine. Elena stared at the coffee cup in her trembling hands and wondered how her life had imploded so completely in the span of 3 hours. The safe room was nicer than her apartment. Plush carpet, leather furniture, a view of Manhattan that probably cost more per square foot than she made in a year. But the 2 armed guards outside the door were a stark reminder that safe room was a polite term for protective custody. She was a prisoner, a witness, a liability. The door opened. Alexander Trask entered, followed by an elegant woman in her 60s wearing a Chanel suit and an expression that could cut glass. Behind them, Marcus closed the door and resumed his sentinel position. Elena, this is my aunt, Catherine Pierce. Alexander's voice was gentler than she'd heard it before. She's on the board of directors and one of the few people I trust completely. I've brought her up to speed. Catherine moved forward and did something that shocked Elena completely. She took both of Elena's hands in hers, her grip warm and firm. Thank you, Catherine said, her eyes glistening. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. Alexander is all the family I have left. You saved his life. Elena's throat tightened. I couldn't let them. I know. Catherine squeezed her hands once more, then released them and turned to Alexander. Show her. Alexander pulled out his tablet and sat beside Elena on the sofa. His proximity made her acutely aware of how different their worlds were. His cologne probably cost more than her monthly rent. His watch was worth more than her car. But when he looked at her, there was no condescension, only respect. Marcus's team enhanced the audio from the boardroom footage, Alexander said. We need you to verify what you heard. This is going to be difficult to listen to. He pressed play. Gregory Sterling's voice filled the room, cold and clinical. Tuesday morning. The quarterly review meeting. He always takes the private elevator alone at 8:15. The cable inspection was yesterday. Our contact confirmed the backup safety already has the defect installed. When it drops, it'll look like catastrophic mechanical failure. Elena's hands clenched. Hearing it again, recorded and undeniable, made it horrifyingly real. Jonathan Reeves responded, and if that fails? It won't. But we have contingencies. The car accident on his way home. The gas leak in his penthouse. Alexander Trask will be dead within 72 hours, and the board will vote us into control before his body's cold. We've already secured the votes. Alexander paused the recording. The votes, Elena. Did they mention any names? Any specific board members? Elena closed her eyes, forcing herself back into that moment of terror. Jonathan said. He said Fitzgerald and Morrison are locked in. Chin will follow wherever the money goes. That's 5 votes including us. We only need 1 more for majority. Catherine's face went pale. David Fitzgerald, Richard Morrison, and Victor Chun. She looked at Alexander. 3 of your most senior board members. God, Alexander, they've been planning this for months. At least. Alexander's jaw was tight. Marcus found financial records. Gregory's been moving money through shell companies to all 3 of them. $2 million to Fitzgerald. 3 to Morrison. Chin got $5 million and a promise of the CFO position once Gregory moves up to CEO. The numbers made Elena dizzy. Millions of dollars. More money than she could comprehend. Changing hands to orchestrate murder. Alexander pressed play again. Jonathan's voice. What about the maid? Elena's blood turned to ice. They'd been talking about her. Even then, in that moment, they'd known. Gregory, handle it quietly. If she heard anything, she becomes a liability. Make it look like an accident. Random mugging. Wrong place, wrong time. No connection to us. The recording ended. Silence filled the room like poison gas. They were planning to kill you too, Catherine whispered, horror etched across her face. Even before they knew for certain you'd overheard. Elena couldn't breathe. Make it look like an accident. Random mugging. They'd been so casual about it, so matter of fact. Her life meant nothing to them. Less than nothing. Just an obstacle to be removed. Alexander's hand covered hers. The touch was warm, grounding, pulling her back from the edge of panic. You're safe now. I promise you, Elena. They will never get near you. But they're going to try. Elena's voice cracked. They have millions of dollars and half the board and assassins on speed dial. What do you have? The truth. Alexander's gray eyes burned with intensity. And you? I'm nobody, Elena said, the words bitter on her tongue. I'm a maid who makes $12 an hour. I don't have lawyers or security teams, or... You have a voice, Catherine interrupted firmly. And courage that most people in that building will never possess. Don't you dare diminish that. Marcus stepped forward. We have something else. This. He pulled up a video on his phone. Security footage from Gregory's office, 9:30 this morning. Watch. The screen showed Gregory at his desk, on the phone. Marcus had enhanced the audio. Gregory's voice, I don't care what it takes. Find her. If she's with Trask, then we accelerate everything. The board meeting is at 2 p.m. I need you to handle both problems before then. A pause. Then, yes, both. Make it look like a murder-suicide. Trask snaps under pressure, kills the cleaning girl who was stalking him, then himself. We'll plant evidence in her apartment. Obsessive notes, photos. The narrative writes itself. Elena's vision swam. Murder-suicide. They were going to kill them both and make her look like some deranged stalker. Her reputation, her mother's memory of her, everything she was would be destroyed along with her body. That recording, Alexander said quietly, gives us motive, means, and conspiracy to commit murder. Combined with the financial records showing bribes to board members, we have everything we need to bury them. But the board meeting is in 3 hours, Catherine said. If Jonathan and Gregory have secured those votes, they'll move to remove you before we can expose them. And without your authority, we lose access to security, legal resources, everything. Alexander stood and moved to the window. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out at the city he'd conquered through sheer force of will and brilliant strategy. Then he turned, and Elena saw something dangerous kindle in his eyes. Then we don't wait for the board meeting, he said. We go on the offensive. Right now. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? Alexander's smile was cold and predatory. I'm thinking it's time Jonathan and Gregory learn what happens when you threaten what's mine. Elena, how would you feel about helping me set a trap? Elena looked at this man, this powerful, brilliant CEO, who should have ignored her note, who should have dismissed her as paranoid or crazy. But instead he'd believed her, protected her, promised to keep her safe. And now he was asking her to fight back. She thought about Gregory's casual voice planning her murder, about Jonathan's cold calculation of her worthlessness, about every moment in her life when she'd been invisible, overlooked, treated as less than. Tell me what you need, Elena said, and her voice didn't shake at all. The plan was simple, elegant, and absolutely terrifying. Elena would return to Pierce Industries wearing a wire. She'd let herself be found by Gregory's people, would pretend to be panicked and desperate, would beg to speak with Jonathan or Gregory privately. And when they thought they had her cornered, when they revealed their hand completely, Marcus's team would have everything recorded. It's too dangerous, Catherine argued, her voice sharp with concern. Alexander, you're asking her to walk into the lion's den. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Alexander said. But Elena could hear the tension beneath his confidence. Marcus will have 6 operatives in the building. Elena will have a panic button. At the first sign of real danger, we extract her. Elena stood by the window, watching the city sprawl below her like a circuit board of light and shadow. Her reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, pale, insubstantial, already half erased from the world. I'll do it, she said quietly. Elena, Alexander started. They're going to kill you if I don't. She turned to face him. That board meeting is in 2.5 hours. If they vote you out, you lose everything. The company, your authority, your ability to protect yourself or me. This is our only chance. The truth of it hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Marcus pulled out a small device no bigger than a button. This goes inside your uniform collar. Audio and GPS tracking. If you say the word help in any context, we come in hard. 30 seconds, maximum response time. Elena took the device with steady hands. She'd been terrified this morning. She'd been paralyzed with fear when she'd heard them planning murder. But somewhere in the past few hours, the terror had crystallized into something harder. Anger. Determination. These men had looked at her and seen nothing worth preserving. They'd calculated her death with the same casual indifference they'd use for any other business decision. She was going to make them see her. 40 minutes later, Elena walked through the employee entrance of Pierce Industries with her ID badge and a hammering heart. The security guard waved her through without a second glance. Just another invisible member of the cleaning staff returning from an unauthorized break. The wire felt like a brand against her skin. She made her way to the housekeeping office on the 3rd floor. Her supervisor, Margaret, looked up from her desk with an expression somewhere between relief and fury. Elena, where the hell have you been? You left your card on the executive floor. HR has been calling, and... I'm sorry. Elena interrupted, letting her voice shake. It wasn't hard. I got scared. There were these men asking about me, and I didn't know what I did wrong. And I panicked. Margaret's anger softened to confusion. Men asking about you? What men? I don't know. Security, maybe? They were on the 63rd floor this morning, and they said someone wanted to talk to me from HR, but the way they looked at me. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. Margaret, I think I'm in trouble. Real trouble. I need to talk to someone. Someone in charge who can help me. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. Let me call up to HR, see what this is about. No. Elena reached out, then pulled back. Please. Not HR. They're the ones who sent those men. Can I talk to someone from the executive team? Maybe Mr. Reeves or Mr. Sterling. They'd know what's going on, right? She watched Margaret's face carefully. If Gregory had gotten to the housekeeping department, if he'd left instructions about Elena, this is where it would show. Margaret's expression shifted, just slightly, but Elena caught it. A flicker of recognition. Of knowledge. Mr. Sterling, Margaret said slowly. Yes, he did mention you might come back confused. Said there was a misunderstanding about your work schedule. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Why don't you wait here? I'll let him know you're back and need clarification. Ice flooded Elena's veins. Margaret was in on it, or at least complicit enough to follow Gregory's instructions without question. Thank you, Elena whispered. Margaret stepped out of the office, phone already to her ear. Elena could hear her murmured conversation through the door. Yes, she just walked in. No, she seems confused, disoriented. Understood. I'll keep her here. Elena's hand moved toward the panic button hidden in her pocket. But no, not yet. She needed them to reveal themselves completely. Needed proof that would stand up in any courtroom. 5 minutes crawled by like hours. Then the door opened. Gregory Sterling stood there in his $1,000 suit, his expression perfectly crafted concern. Behind him, 2 men in security uniforms Elena had never seen before. Not building security. Private contractors. Elena, Gregory said warmly. Margaret tells me you're upset. Come, let's go somewhere private where we can talk about this misunderstanding. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but Elena forced herself to nod, to stand on shaking legs, to follow Gregory into the hallway. They didn't head toward the executive offices. They moved toward the loading dock elevators, the industrial ones that serviced the parking garage and maintenance levels. The areas without cameras. Mr. Sterling, Elena said, her voice small. Where are we going? Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can resolve this without causing you further embarrassment. His smile never wavered. You've had a stressful morning, Elena. I understand you overheard something that concerned you, but you misunderstood the context. Corporate discussions can sound alarming to outsiders. They entered the elevator. The 2 security contractors flanked her. One of them pressed the button for sublevel 3, the lowest parking level, the one that stayed mostly empty during business hours. The doors closed. I know what I heard, Elena whispered. Gregory's smile finally dropped. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. Yes, I imagine you did. The wire was recording everything. Marcus's team was tracking her location. Help was 30 seconds away. But as the elevator descended into the darkness of the parking garage, as she saw the cold calculation in Gregory Sterling's eyes, Elena realized 30 seconds might be 29 seconds too long. The elevator doors opened onto concrete and shadows. A black van sat idling nearby, its side door already open. You should have stayed invisible, Gregory said, pulling her forward. You should have remembered your place. One of the contractors grabbed her other arm. They were moving her toward the van, moving fast, and Elena knew with terrible certainty that if she got inside that vehicle, no security team would find her in time. Her hand closed around the panic button, but before she could press it, a gun pressed against her ribs. Don't, the contractor whispered. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. And Elena Ripley, who'd been brave enough to walk into a CEO's office, who'd been courageous enough to face her would-be killers, felt that courage shatter into terror as she was dragged toward the van that would be her tomb. The gun against Elena's ribs felt like ice and fire simultaneously, a cold metal promise of death that burned through every nerve ending in her body. 3 more steps to the van. 2. 1. And then the parking garage exploded with light and sound. Floodlights blazed from every corner, blinding in their intensity. Vehicles roared to life, not just 1 or 2, but 6 black SUVs that had been hidden in the shadows, engines silent until this exact moment. Doors flew open and men in tactical gear poured out, weapons drawn, voices sharp and commanding. Hands up. Drop the weapon. Now. The contractor with the gun froze. For one terrible heartbeat, Elena felt his finger tighten on the trigger, the microscopic increase in pressure that meant he was considering going out in a blaze of violence. Then Marcus Chin's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You pull that trigger, you're dead before her body hits the ground. You know who I am. You know I don't bluff. The contractor knew. Elena felt it in the way his grip loosened, in the tremor that ran through his arm. Marcus Chun was legend in private security circles, the man who'd protected 3 presidents and killed a terrorist with a ballpoint pen in Jakarta. The gun dropped to the concrete with a clatter that echoed like thunder. Down. On the ground. All of you. Gregory Sterling's face went through a remarkable transformation, from predatory confidence to shock to desperate calculation in the span of 3 seconds. He released Elena's wrist and raised his hand slowly, his mind clearly racing through exit strategies that no longer existed. Elena stumbled backward, her legs barely supporting her weight. Strong hands caught her. Marcus, his face grim but his eyes relieved. You're okay, he said quietly. You're safe now. Breathe. She tried. Her lungs felt like they'd forgotten the mechanics of respiration. The contractors were face down on the concrete, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Gregory stood with his hands raised, surrounded by armed operatives, his expression morphing into righteous indignation. This is outrageous. His voice echoed off the concrete walls. You're assaulting a member of the executive team based on the paranoid delusions of a mentally unstable employee. I was trying to help this poor woman, trying to get her the psychiatric care she clearly needs. Save it. Alexander Trask emerged from one of the SUVs, and Elena had never seen anything more terrifying or more beautiful than the cold fury on his face. He walked past his security team, past the bound contractors, until he stood directly in front of Gregory Sterling. I have you on tape, Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet. Planning my murder. I have financial records showing you bribing board members. I have communication logs proving conspiracy. And I have a recording from 30 minutes ago where you admitted to Elena that she should have stayed invisible. He leaned closer. You're done, Gregory. You were done the moment you underestimated the woman you tried to kill. Gregory's face went pale, then red, then a mottled purple that suggested a blood pressure crisis. You can't prove anything, he spat. You think the board will believe some cleaning lady over me? Over Jonathan? We've been planning this for 2 years, Alexander. 2 years. We have contingencies for contingencies. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. 2 years, Alexander repeated softly. Then he smiled, and it was absolutely terrifying. You spent 2 years planning my death. I spent 3 hours planning yours. Professional death, anyway. Let's see whose planning was better. He pulled out his phone and pressed a single button. On the wall of the parking garage, a massive screen flickered to life. One of the emergency notification displays meant for evacuation alerts. But instead of evacuation instructions, it showed a live feed of the executive boardroom on the 63rd floor. The room was packed. Not just board members, but reporters, federal agents, the company's legal team. And Catherine Pierce stood at the head of the conference table like an avenging angel in Chanel. Ladies and gentlemen, Catherine's voice rang out from speakers hidden throughout the parking garage. Thank you for attending this emergency session. What you're about to see represents the most significant corporate corruption case in Pierce Industries history. The screen split. One side showed Catherine in the boardroom. The other showed live footage from the parking garage. Gregory Sterling, caught in the act of attempted kidnapping and murder. Gregory's face went from purple to sheet white. No, you can't. I already did. Alexander's voice was cold steel. Every major news outlet in New York has received the evidence package. The SEC has been notified of the financial crimes. The FBI is very interested in the murder-for-hire conspiracy. And your co-conspirator Jonathan Reeves? He's being arrested in his office as we speak. As if on cue, the boardroom screen switched to show another live feed. Jonathan Reeves being led out of his office in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You destroyed me, Gregory whispered, the reality finally sinking in. You destroyed everything. No, Elena said, her voice stronger than she expected. Everyone turned to look at her. This small woman in a housekeeping uniform who'd brought down an empire of corruption. You destroyed yourself. I just refused to stay invisible while you committed murder. Catherine's voice from the speakers. The board has voted unanimously to terminate Gregory Sterling and Jonathan Reeves for cause, to cooperate fully with federal investigations, and to implement immediate reforms to prevent such corruption in the future. We apologize to our shareholders, our employees, and especially to Miss Elena Ripley, whose courage saved this company and her CEO's life. The words hung in the air like a benediction. Marcus stepped forward and formally arrested Gregory Sterling, reading him his rights in that calm, professional tone that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times before. The contractors were hauled away. The parking garage slowly emptied of personnel until only Alexander, Elena, and Marcus remained. Alexander turned to Elena. For a long moment, he just looked at her. This woman who'd been invisible, who'd been nothing in the eyes of men like Gregory, who'd somehow found the strength to stand in the darkness and demand to be seen. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "Thank you for being brave enough to press that note into my hand, for trusting me, for walking into hell because you refused to let them win." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I was so scared." "I know." Alexander reached out, hesitated, then gently squeezed her shoulder. "But you did it anyway. That's what courage is." If this story is giving you all the feels, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your favorite moment so far. Marcus cleared his throat. "Boss, we should get you both out of here. Media is going to be swarming the building in about 10 minutes. But Alexander didn't move. He was looking at Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something deeper. "Your life is going to change," he said quietly. "After today, after this goes public, you won't be invisible anymore. Everyone will know your name. Are you ready for that?" Elena thought about her studio apartment in Queens, her nursing degree dreams, her quiet, small life that had imploded the moment she decided to do the right thing. "No," she admitted, "but I wasn't ready for any of this. I just did what needed to be done." Alexander smiled, a real smile this time, warm and genuine. "Then you're exactly the kind of person I want in my life. Come on, let's go face the world together." The media firestorm hit before they even made it out of the parking garage. By the time Alexander's security team escorted them to the secure conference room on the 15th floor, every major news network was running the story. Elena watched herself on CNN, grainy security footage of her pressing the note into Alexander's hand, her face pale with terror. The headline screamed, "Housekeeping hero saves CEO from assassination plot." "Hero," Elena whispered, staring at the screen. The word felt foreign, impossible. Heroes were soldiers and firefighters, and people who ran into burning buildings. Not maids who cleaned toilets and emptied trash cans. But Alexander stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "That's exactly what you are. Own it." The boardroom door burst open. Catherine entered, followed by a woman in a severe black suit carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than Elena's car. "Alexander, this is Sarah Martinez, our chief legal counsel," Catherine said, her voice crisp and efficient despite the chaos. "Sarah, this is Elena Ripley." Sarah extended her hand, and Elena shook it with fingers that still trembled slightly. "Miss Ripley, on behalf of Pierce Industries, I want to personally thank you and apologize for the danger you were placed in by employees of this company. We're prepared to offer you comprehensive legal representation, protection services, and we need to talk about the board members," Alexander interrupted. His voice was harder now, the CEO voice that moved billions with a single decision. "Fitzgerald, Morrison, and Shun. What's their status?" Sarah's expression darkened. "All three have retained counsel. They're claiming they were deceived by Gregory and Jonathan, that they thought the payments were legitimate consulting fees." "That's bullshit," Marcus said from his position by the door. "We have communications showing they knew exactly what they were voting for. They knew you were being removed. They knew the timing was suspicious." "Knowing and proving are different things," Sarah admitted. "Their lawyers are good. Without concrete evidence that they knew about the assassination plot specifically, we're looking at civil penalties, not criminal charges." Alexander's jaw clenched. Elena could see the fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior, the rage of a man who'd built an empire only to discover that people he'd trusted, people he'd elevated to positions of power, had been willing to watch him die for money. "Then we give them a choice," Catherine said quietly. She looked at Alexander with eyes that held both steel and sorrow. You're still CEO? You still control this company. You offer them a way out. Full resignation, forfeiture of all compensation, public admission of accepting inappropriate payments. In exchange, we don't pursue criminal charges. They tried to kill him, Elena heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. They took money to help murder him. And you're just going to let them walk away? Sarah's expression softened. Miss Ripley, I understand your anger. But corporate law is complicated. What we can prove and what we know aren't always the same thing. If we push for criminal prosecution and lose, they walk away with their reputations intact and possibly sue us for wrongful termination. But if they resign and admit guilt publicly, Alexander said slowly, they're destroyed professionally. No other company will touch them. Their careers are over. It's not prison, but it's permanent exile from everything they valued. Elena thought about Gregory Sterling's face when he'd realized his plan had failed. The desperation, the disbelief, the knowledge that everything he'd worked for was ashes. She thought about what it must feel like for Fitzgerald, Morrison, and Chun right now, watching the news, knowing their names were about to be dragged through the mud, knowing their families would see what they'd done. Make them admit it publicly, she said. Make them stand in front of cameras and confess. Make them visible. Alexander's eyes met hers, and understanding passed between them. Visibility was its own punishment for people who'd hidden behind power and privilege their entire lives. Done, he said. 6 hours later, Elena stood in Alexander's private office and watched 3 disgraced board members read prepared statements to a room full of reporters. Their voices were hollow. Their faces were ashen. They admitted to accepting bribes, to voting against the CEO's interests, to betraying their fiduciary duty. They didn't mention the assassination plot. That was part of the deal. But everyone watching knew. Everyone understood what had really happened. When it was over, when the reporters had been escorted out and the building had finally begun to quiet, Alexander turned to Elena. How are you holding up? She laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. I've been asked that question about 40 times today. Reporters, lawyers, police officers, FBI agents. Everyone wants to know how the maid is handling her 15 minutes of fame. This is going to be more than 15 minutes, Catherine said gently. She'd remained in the office, a steady presence throughout the day's chaos. Elena, dear, your life has fundamentally changed. The story of what you did, risking everything to save a man you didn't even know, it's going to resonate with people. You're going to be offered book deals, speaking engagements, interviews. Elena felt dizzy. I don't want any of that. I just want to go back to my apartment and sleep for about 3 days. You can't go back to your apartment, Marcus said flatly. Not yet. Gregory and Jonathan are in custody, but they had contacts, people who might feel obligated to finish what they started. We need to keep you in protective custody for at least a week, maybe longer. The weight of it crashed over her like a wave. She'd saved Alexander's life, but in doing so, she'd destroyed her own quiet existence. No more anonymity. No more invisibility. She was Elena Ripley, housekeeping hero, and she would be that person forever. Hey. Alexander's voice was soft. He crossed the office until he stood directly in front of her. Look at me. She did. His gray eyes were warm now, filled with something that made her breath catch. You gave me my life back, he said. Let me help you build a new one. A better one. Whatever you want. Finish your nursing degree, start a new career, travel the world. I will make it happen. Not because I owe you, though I do, but because you deserve it. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. I don't know what I want anymore. This morning I was a maid. Tonight I'm on CNN. Tomorrow I'm what? Who am I supposed to be? Whoever you want to be, Catherine said firmly. For once in your life, Elena, you get to choose. No more making yourself small. No more hiding. You stood up and demanded to be seen. Now the whole world is watching. What do you want them to see? Elena wiped her eyes. She thought about her mother in Ohio, who'd raised her alone after her father left, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, who'd taught her that doing the right thing mattered, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. I want them to see someone who wasn't special, Elena said slowly. Someone who was just ordinary and scared but did the right thing anyway. Because if I can do it, if someone like me can stand up to powerful men and win, then maybe other people can too. Alexander smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Then that's exactly what we'll show them. He extended his hand. Not as a CEO to an employee, not as a powerful man to a powerless woman, but as equals, as partners in survival. Elena took his hand, and for the first time since she'd pressed that note into his palm 12 hours ago, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. You've come this far with Elena and Alexander. Don't leave now. The ending is going to be worth it. 3 months later, Elena stood in front of a lecture hall at Columbia University, looking out at 200 faces hanging on her every word. The moment I pressed that note into his hand, she said, her voice steady and clear, I stopped being invisible. Not because the world suddenly decided I mattered, but because I decided it myself. The auditorium erupted in applause. Elena smiled, still getting used to this. The recognition, the respect, the way people looked at her now like she was someone worth listening to. After the lecture, she found Alexander waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with that slight smile she'd come to know well over the past months. You were magnificent, he said, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the exit. Though I still think you undersell the part where you walked into a parking garage knowing armed men were waiting. I had backup, Elena reminded him. 6 SUVs full of tactical operatives, remember? You had courage first. His hand brushed against hers. Casual, natural, the way it had been happening more and more lately. Everything else was just logistics. They emerged into the crisp autumn afternoon. Elena's life had transformed so completely that sometimes she had to remind herself it was real. The nursing scholarship Alexander had personally funded. The position on Pierce Industries' new ethics oversight board that Catherine had insisted she accept. The speaking tour that had taken her to 12 cities, sharing her story with thousands of people who needed to hear that ordinary people could make extraordinary differences. And then there was Alexander himself. Coffee? He asked, gesturing toward the cafe across the street. Or do you have another interview scheduled? Elena checked her phone. Clear until dinner. Mom's flying in tonight. She wants to see the new apartment before she heads back to Ohio. The apartment, you still insist, is too much, Alexander teased. Despite the fact that it's a modest 2-bedroom in a building with actual security. It has a doorman named Bernard who tips his hat at me, Elena said, laughing. 3 months ago, I was the person people like Bernard ignored. Now he treats me like royalty. You saved a man's life and brought down a corporate conspiracy. That's literally the definition of worthy of hat tipping. They settled into a corner booth at the cafe, the same one they'd started meeting at 6 weeks ago when protective custody had evolved into coffee meetings, and then into something neither of them had quite defined yet, but both understood was important. Alexander ordered his usual black coffee. Elena got a caramel latte, no longer self-conscious about the price difference between their drinks or the 1,000 other small reminders of their different backgrounds. I got a call from Margaret this morning, Elena said, stirring her latte absently. My old supervisor. She wanted to apologize again for what happened. Alexander's expression darkened slightly. Margaret had been fired along with everyone else who'd been complicit in Gregory's scheme, not out of malice, but because she'd chosen not to ask questions when a man in power gave her suspicious instructions. How did that go? He asked carefully. Strange. She kept saying she didn't know, that she thought she was just following orders. Elena met his eyes. I believe her, but I also think that's exactly the problem. Nobody asks questions. Nobody wants to see what's happening right in front of them if it's uncomfortable or complicated. That's why what you're doing matters, Alexander said. The talks, the advocacy work, the ethics position. You're making people ask questions. Before Elena could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled. It's from Cameron and Lou. She'd taken to using characters' names from movies, per her storytelling template. The 2 board members who voted against the removal motion even when they thought they'd lose. They want to have lunch next week to discuss expanding the whistleblower protection program. They're good people, Alexander said. They risked their careers standing with me when it looked like I was finished. Like someone else we know, Elena pointed out. His hand covered hers across the table. The difference is you risked your life. They risked their jobs. Not quite the same stakes. The warmth of his touch sent a flutter through her chest. The same flutter she'd been feeling more frequently. The one that suggested this thing between them was becoming something neither of them could ignore much longer. Alexander, she started, then hesitated. Elena, he said at the same time. They both stopped. Laughed. You first, Elena said. Alexander took a breath, and she saw something vulnerable in his eyes, that rare glimpse of the man behind the CEO armor. These past 3 months, getting to know you, watching you transform from someone terrified and hiding into this force of nature who stands on stages and makes people believe they can change the world. He paused. I'm falling in love with you. Actually, that's not accurate. I think I started falling the moment you pressed that note into my hand and trusted me to believe you. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. That's convenient, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I'm pretty sure I started falling when you said Elena for the first time, like my name actually mattered. His thumb traced circles on her palm. It does matter. You matter. Everything about you matters to me. We come from completely different worlds, Elena said, even as her fingers laced through his. Your net worth has more zeros than I can count. I'm still getting used to having a savings account with 4 digits in it. I don't care about that, Alexander said firmly. You're the bravest, most genuine person I've ever met. You see through the corporate pretense straight to what actually matters: integrity, courage, doing the right thing even when it's terrifying. That's worth more than any bank account. Elena leaned forward, close enough to see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. You know everyone's going to talk. The CEO and the former maid. The fairy tale that's too good to be true. Let them talk, Alexander said. I've spent 15 years building a company, accumulating wealth and power, surrounding myself with people who told me what I wanted to hear. And I was still blind to the conspiracy happening right under my nose. You, working for $12 an hour, invisible to everyone who mattered. You saw the truth and refused to let it be buried. That makes you more valuable than anyone in that building. A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. Alexander reached up and gently wiped it away. Besides, he added with a slight smile, you're on the ethics board now. That makes you technically my boss when it comes to moral decisions. So really, you're dating down. Elena laughed through her tears. That's the worst logic I've ever heard. Probably. I'm a CEO, not a philosopher. He squeezed her hand. Elena Ripley, would you like to have dinner with me? Not as business associates, not as conspirators in corporate espionage prevention, but as two people who've been dancing around this for weeks because we're both terrified and hopeful at the same time. Yes, Elena said, her heart soaring. Yes, I absolutely would. 6 months later, Elena stood beside Alexander at a press conference announcing Pierce Industries' new corporate transparency initiative. Gregory Sterling and Jonathan Reeves were serving 7 and 9 years respectively for conspiracy to commit murder and corporate fraud. Fitzgerald, Morrison, and Chun had faded into obscurity, their names synonymous with corporate betrayal. But more importantly, Pierce Industries had become a model for ethical business practices. Whistleblower protections had been strengthened. Independent ethics oversight had been established. And Elena's role as Director of Corporate Integrity had given her a platform to ensure what happened to her could never happen to anyone else. Questions, Alexander said to the assembled reporters. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Trask, Miss Ripley, there are rumors about your relationship. Can you confirm you're dating? Alexander glanced at Elena. She nodded, smiling. Yes, he said simply. Elena and I are together. She saved my life, changed my company, and taught me what real courage looks like. I'm the luckiest man in New York. Miss Ripley, another reporter called out. Do you have any advice for people facing ethical dilemmas at their jobs? Elena stepped forward. She thought about the terrified maid who'd written 3 words on a scrap of paper, convinced she was nobody important. Speak up, she said clearly. Even when you're scared. Especially when you're scared. Your voice matters. You matter. And sometimes the smallest act of courage can save lives and change everything. The reporters scribbled notes. Cameras flashed. And Elena Ripley, no longer invisible, no longer silent, stood beside the man she loved and knew with absolute certainty that she'd found her place in the world. Not because someone had given it to her, but because she'd claimed it herself. That evening, Elena and Alexander sat on the balcony of her apartment, the one that had seemed impossibly luxurious 6 months ago and now just felt like home. Her mother had finally stopped worrying quite so much, though she still called twice a week to make sure Elena was being careful with that CEO fellow. I've been thinking, Alexander said, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sun set over Manhattan. Dangerous activity, Elena teased. About the future. About us. He turned to face her fully. I know it's only been 6 months. I know by conventional standards we should wait longer. But conventional stopped applying to us the moment you walked into my office with that note. Elena's breath caught. Alexander. I'm not proposing, he said quickly, then smiled. Not yet, anyway. But I want you to know that's where this is heading for me. You're it, Elena. The person I want beside me for every corporate crisis, every ethical dilemma, every morning coffee, and every sunset. Whenever you're ready to hear that officially, I'll be here. Elena kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she smiled against his lips. Ask me in 6 more months, she whispered. Give me time to get used to this new life, this new version of myself. But Alexander? The answer's going to be yes. His joy was radiant, transforming his entire face. I love you, Elena Ripley. I love you too, Alexander Trask. My hero. Your hero. He raised an eyebrow. I believe you're the one who did all the saving. We saved each other, Elena said simply. You gave me the courage to be seen. I gave you the truth you needed to survive. That's what love is, seeing each other completely and choosing each other anyway. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Elena Ripley knew her story had found its perfect ending. Not because everything was perfect. There would still be challenges, still be fears to overcome, still be days when doubt crept in. But because she'd learned the most important truth of all, courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. It was about refusing to stay invisible when visibility meant saving a life. And in choosing courage, in choosing to matter, she'd found not just justice and vindication, but love, purpose, and a future brighter than anything she'd dared to imagine. Thank you so much for following Elena and Alexander's journey. If this story touched your heart, I'd absolutely love for you to hit that subscribe button and share your favorite moment in the comments below. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me bring you more stories of courage, love, and transformation. Where are you watching from today? Let me know. I love connecting with this amazing community. Until next time, remember, you matter, your voice matters, and sometimes the smallest act of courage can change everything.